Community School District. The district is holding this public hearing on district concrete projects. Let the record show that all board members are present. We will start with a presentation on the concrete projects, followed by questions from the board members and questions from the public. Dr. Murillo, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. LaPerla. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Wilson, who will come and present on the project or introduce those that will be presenting on the project. And I think Mr. Wilson's also going to introduce our new Director of Facilities this evening. So, Mr. Wilson, floor is yours.
So I do want to introduce Nick Olson. Nick is our new Director of Facilities. He started about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now. And he comes from us from he had several places where he worked before, but his background is in property management and property repairs and maintenance. And also he had spent the last couple of years working for an assisted living facility for the elder care. So he understands about taking care of people, and we welcome him and thank him thankful that he's here right today. I do want to introduce Jared Olson from HGM and Lincoln Rodenberg from HGM as well. They are going to be presenting on the concrete project. I had asked about 45 days ago to come up with a project to repair the worst concrete areas of our district. And we're getting this whittled down now, so we don't have a lot of those places, but we do have a few remaining. And so Jared is going to talk about the project that we've come up with at this time.
Good evening. I'm back to talk about concrete again. I know you guys get very excited when you see that on the agenda. So this year's project has been number 22002. And as Dean said, we are working our way through the list. Many years ago, we did a district-wide assessment of all the pavement. There had been a conversation amongst the board and staff about the ongoing maintenance needed to it, how to be proactive, get it all up to a good place, and what measures could be done to extend the lifetime of the pavements that are on the district sites. As Dean said, the district has done a really good job of whittling away at that, and we are down to the final big chunks that need to be tackled all at once that require larger bid packages. These are the 4 sites that were selected. We considered other sites as well, but these were seemed to work into a good bid package that we could target in one school summer. The 4 sites are the first site is Abraham Lincoln. For those that have been out there, the areas in back are the areas we haven't addressed yet over the last 3 to 5 years. This area gets a whole lot of heavy truck traffic. This is the deliveries back up to the food kitchen, the dumpsters, all the heavy equipment, etc. That pavement has been in bad shape since I've been coming to school board meetings. It's been patched together for a long time. It's time to deal with it now. And then we're going to pick up just a few of the other miscellaneous spots that never got picked up during the previous full parking lot replacement projects. I have just a couple pictures in here of the condition. I've met on site with staff a few times. We also have a few strategies. I'll get with Nick here once spring comes to target areas for maintenance. This area is known for erosion of the soils more so than the actual pavement being the issue, causing long-term problems out there. Second site is going to be College View Elementary School. The district has proactively gotten after several of the patches out there. We're going to hit the last big patches that need to be grabbed. There's 2 different colors on here. Same as Abraham Lincoln, the red is full depth. Take it all out, put back new in those approximate areas. The yellow actually is going to be partial depth joint repair. Both College View and Carter Lake seem to be having a similar joint failure issue, but the pavement itself is not moving. That's a good sign. That means you still have structural stability. You're just starting to lose the actual concrete itself. So what we're going to do for those 2 large yellow areas is we're going to go in, clean up the joints, and then we're going to propose doing a 2-inch overlay on top of that to seal the top. That has shown itself to be a highly successful approach when you have a strong concrete base underneath. That's not an option for a lot of places where you start getting movement because asphalt's flexible and those cracks and potholes will just radiate right through after just a couple of years. These are just a couple pictures of the existing things. You can see on the right picture where the joints are kind of getting at where the corners come together, starting to break apart That's what we're referring to. The lack of movement between the panels, though, is a good sign. Third site is Thomas Jefferson High School. This area has more of a spotty patchwork type thing. It doesn't seem to be a site-wide issue. These are the areas we've identified that we're going to target in this bid package. The front entrance sidewalks, it's not just a quality of concrete issue. There's getting to be a bit of a aesthetic issue. There's been lots of patches over the years. So when we get out there next spring, depending on the winter we have and how much more deterioration we have, we might try to just get a nice uniform look in the front there as well. We'll handle that once we get bid prices and know where things are at. These are just a few of the photos there. Along First Avenue is that First Avenue corridor is the first picture. That's the entrance. You can see there's about 3 or 4 generations of concrete showing up in just that one photograph. And then the other one's just one of the parking lots that the students use. And finally, the fourth site is Woodrow Wilson. We talked several years ago when the remodel was happening that some of the areas needed to remain in bad condition, not in bad condition, but they were the construction access drives, and we knew we would have to address them later. We're now at that point. That north drive is in pretty rough shape. Out here, the real issue seems to be drainage. That whole area, as you may be aware, has drainage issues. It's not just the site issue. The city streets also have issues and whatnot. We're going to really look and see what we can do to improve that while we're out there. Improvement is probably attainable. Getting it to good might be a little bit harder to accomplish, but we will do our best to improve that area. These are just a few of the photos. That center joint has been getting worse by the years. And then finally, you've heard this from me many times. One thing that we have been doing in the last 5 to 8 years or so is calcium inhibitors. A lot of your concrete failure appears to be caused by the salt that is needed to keep the ice under control, getting into the joints when the concrete is still new. This helps resist that reaction. That's what it looks like after it's applied. In the first year, the snow actually melts in that fashion. It actually reacts that way. And then finally, with Nick on board now, we're going to be talking with him and his staff next summer as the work is going on. This is an example of a patch that got done. It's just a location in town here, not one of the district properties. And then the maintenance that was needed wasn't done. And then sure enough, within just a few years, the patch is causing a problem again. The one problem with the patch is you now doubled your joints. So you have to be focused on getting the joints done. We'll talk with staff about that. Finally, project details. The 4 sites, we've estimated just under $900,000 for the current price. Bid prices, you've heard this all year, are fluctuating a lot right now. But we do have an overall repair budget of about $1 million. And we're going to target expanding or contracting the areas based on what it looks like next spring after all the winter work, after all the winter impact is complete. And then finally, here's our current proposed schedule here tonight. We'll be receiving bids in January. I'll come back in January with the bids for recommendation of award, and then we'll try to tackle all the work over the summer. We are going to set the project up as such that the contractor can't move in, rip it out, and not get done before school starts. And finally, are there any questions?
Go ahead.
Go for it. You have any?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the life expectancy of the patch versus the 2-inch overlay that you were talking about versus a full replacement? How many years we're looking at with the difference?
Yeah, so a full depth concrete patch, if it's properly maintained, 25 to 30 years wouldn't be unreasonable. A lot of things can factor into that. An asphalt overlay, you might be looking at doing another touch up to that after maybe as soon as 10 years, but it won't be nearly as substantial or extensive typically.
Okay.
A lot of that depends on proper maintenance and all that.
Right. Industry-wide, are we still seeing the backlog of projects around the community and increasing the costs and the prices and things of that nature? And these are projects that we can't put off until prices start to come down with concrete and labor?
I haven't heard much optimism on prices coming back down to where we used to see them.
Okay.
We do think availability of materials might be more of an issue than anything else. And we will assess the bid prices when we get them and give our opinion on whether maybe this isn't a good season or not.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to follow up on a couple of things. So this all came about by doing, over the summer, after Travis Martin left, I actually went out to all the buildings with Aaron and Raymond, and we walked every square inch, it feels like, of those buildings, and we found certain things like this. And this is something I think that we have to do. We also have a list of other concrete projects that are going to have to be done probably the year after that, but these were the worst ones. We're also looking at what materials are we putting down for ice melt. So I've asked the warehouse not to order rock salt anymore. We will use that probably for our parking lots because the parking lots are very big. We have to dump that stuff in a truck and then move it around. But for our sidewalks and for our bus lanes, we're using a product that is ice melt that is non-corrosive to the concrete. So even though it will cost us more in the short term, we figure it'll save us money in the long term for the concrete repairs. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Any members of the public that would like to address the board on this? The board will take action on this project at a future meeting. So I'll go ahead and close our public hearing and open our regular business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Directors. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Kazire.
Present.
Mr. Arthur.
Here.
Ms. Shudek.
Here.
Ms. Myers.
Here.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Here.
Mr. LaFurla.
Present. Next, please, if you will, join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the agenda's been approved. Next, we have approval of minutes from the workshop, business meeting, and annual meeting of November 8th, 2022. Is there a motion?
I can move approval of the workshop and business meeting and annual meeting minutes of November 8th, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And the minutes have been approved. Next is public participation. Did we have anybody request time? Doesn't look like it. Okay. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. I thought we could start our report this evening by allowing board members to have a reflection about our IASB conference. So I'll let you kind of chair that part.
Absolutely. So the school board members attend the Iowa Association of School Boards Convention annually in November, and several of us were able to attend this year. Always a good opportunity for professional learning for school board members. They offer a variety of sessions and pre-conference sessions, especially for new board members in those pre-conference sessions. And I guess I would just open it up to board members who were in attendance this year on takeaways.
I'll say this was my first year attending both days, which was really nice and beneficial. And especially the topics that I attended focused a lot on mental well-being, which was a really great takeaway. And also just de-escalating conflict, which I thought I really appreciated. And yeah, that was probably the biggest takeaways I had from it, and just the positive experience being with everyone.
Sure. My biggest takeaway is something that we've actually had training through my company too. It was recognizing unconscious bias. One of the keynote speakers really hit on try to leave everything you're thinking about a person, about a situation behind. Actually listen to understand, don't listen to respond, it's hard to recognize that you are biased, and to get past that, to move forward to understanding the whole situation is super important, and that keynote speaker hit it right on the head for me.
Yeah, there were a couple of really good speakers this year. Lauren, did you have anything to share?
So I agree. The keynote speakers were wonderful. I think even though it wasn't really a themed conference, there was a lot of workshops around communication and the keynote speakers address as well. And I think it was just a good reminder of how our communication changed throughout the pandemic and even now, and just a reminder of how we can, still communicate with one another, and some new tools that I can bring back to the board to help us during our workshops that I thought will be great to share with all of you and pass along. And it was also my first year serving as the delegate since Jill was not with us. And that was actually a really great opportunity. I know some of us traveled bright and early and made it despite the winter weather that we had, but it was really nice to meet some other local board members that were also delegates and kind of see how that process and the voting go, and kind of our school board's legislative priorities for this up and coming year across the state. And it was nice to see, how we're on the same board with page with other boards, but also different, and what priorities we ended up being focused on, which kind of leads into the UEN banquet that we're always attending. And that was really nice to get some updated information as well on how our school district is affected as an urban school district compared to rural ones. So that was very insightful too.
I would say, once again, struck by the differences between small districts and big districts, right? And the issues that you deal with and the discussions you have at a table where maybe the three people who are all brand new at some certain district are all together, and I think they all got elected because they opposed like the hiring of a wrestling coach, or they opposed the firing of a teacher. I mean, it's like, it's amazing how much, people's, passion, for or against the subject drives who you vote for your school board. And then they come in and you're talking to them about things they've never thought about, never had the discussion of, don't even know about, And so I find a lot of times there's a lot that the Council of Schools does for students that goes unnoticed by anybody, and unappreciated by the public. And I think that I wish we had more light, I think, shown on what we do. At the same time, I think there's times when I leave there and I go, man, we just need to do everything so different than what we do. That's how I always feel. I don't know how Dr. Miller feels. She goes things, and you're sitting there probably talking with school administrators, and you hear things, you're like, gosh, we should do that. And I find that a lot. And I talk to students who've gone on, who graduated, and they come back and they're talking about their struggles, and you're like, gosh, I wish we would focus more, on these particular things. And I think that that's probably the challenge I would say to us is to, to take those times, as we come back throughout the year, to really have hard discussions about, the level of education we provide, what service we provide. We're so good at providing services and becoming a conduit for services. It's funny that we had our legislators here today, and yet a lot of that isn't education. That's just, we're bringing these services forward, that are required. And I think sometimes making sure our students are really become passionate about education, enjoy education, that's probably the trick we don't, we really need to find, is how do we engage kids, engage families. And I wish people could see some of the excitement of a great speaker, when he comes up and talks about bias, what that means. And I think that would, once again, I think if we could bring some speakers here to town, however we could do that to engage the public in communication, I think would be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Arthur?
Yeah.
Mr. Arthur and I were down in the area of the vendors, and all of a sudden I hear Troy Arthur's name. I'd like to know what you did with that beautiful painting you won.
Oh my gosh, yeah, okay. So,
It was
it's
a great, explain what was on it.
It's a painting, there was two paintings from a bus company. They're prints, right? And there was a bus in that next to a house, like a country bus, which is kind of cute. And there was a bus next to a lighthouse, which is a little odd. So right now, it's just sitting in the house. I gotta find the appropriate lighthouse.
It's almost as big as that.
Yeah,
Those
the
posters
lighthouse
are
themed
huge.
room or the bus theme room. We could put that, I mean, maybe donate that to
And once
the
I-
school
once he-
district. It'd be,
Well, and once you heard your name, I looked over and
I
he was
know.
gone. He
I
just
was like,
left
what
me.
the heck?
He won. He was
Yeah.
gone. I was like, where'd he
Yeah.
go? Good for you.
well, you were like, you won.
I said, that's your name.
And I was always excited. JJ Harvey would always win iPads and things, you know. So.
So, yeah, that was a lot of fun when we were down there.
Was there anything from the sessions you attended that you wanted to share out on?
I think that, I think it is really good for our, for IASB, for the state to really focus on mental health, which they did, and really encouraging people to have conversation and the biases that we talked about. Because our state is changing and we need to be prepared to have those conversations and the work that we do. There was some around like the transfer policies and what that could look like that they brought in there, the lawyer that spoke. But I think that the last speaker was about mental health and the work that we're doing. And we've kind of taken it down to the online trauma, and then we added another, I would call that leg of the stool, which I don't want to steal Tim's thunder tonight. But then finally really talking about consistent language that we're having and how we're supporting kids. And to see us with a partnership like All Care, that'll eventually have
Yeah.
that mobile. That's what most districts are all searching for. How do we address this problem? And I don't think there's one way to do it. I think it's multiple variables that we'll have to bring together because each child's so different. But it was great to hear that the conversation around that was occurring. And I think that's something we just have to continue because it magnified coming out of the pandemic.
Well, part of the convention, just for the public to know, is we attended the UEN banquet on the night before the convention. I thought that was a very helpful exercise to sit around the table and talk about all of our successes, things that we're proud of. We don't take enough time to do that, I don't think. One of the sessions that I attended, I thought that was most interesting was the session on how the open enrollment, the change in the elimination of the open enrollment deadline is affecting school districts. It was just interesting to hear some of the questions from districts on very unique situations that their school district is experiencing, and there's a lot of confusion about what's legal and what isn't, and what school districts should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing, and that elimination of that deadline has created a lot of confusion in our schools. And it happened sort of at the last minute. So that was unique. And as Troy mentioned, we normally I would mention that at the end of the board meeting, but at our work session just before this meeting, we had our annual meeting with legislators that we do before our legislature begins their session, and we talked about school priorities, our legislative priorities, and kind of got feedback and insights from the legislators on what they expect to see this year. And one of those issues that we talked about was open enrollment. So,
I guess if I had a question for Troy. You talk about the challenges that our students meet, and with pending with the sense of what's going to happen during this coming legislation, going after our students that are LGBTQIA transgendered, how are we as a school board going to support our students that are struggling? I guess that's just a question that it seems like those students are going to be targeted by our legislature and our governor, and we have to be very assertive and very committed to taking care of all of our students, since suicide rates we know for LGBTQ students are astronomical compared to the general population of students of the same age. So we have to be very, very cautious and very committed to, no matter what happens in our legislation, to meet the challenges that those students face on a daily basis, and to be able to serve them to the best of our ability. So I guess that's just a comment. I guess not a question,
Yeah.
but it's,
Well, that's something, as a board, we definitely need to talk about. We know we're always here for all our students in the districts and their families and our employees, but, you know, there may need to be dedicated time that we sit down and have a more in-depth conversation about, are we going to be talking publicly like we are today? Or, you know, are there policies or certain things that we need to dive in a little bit deeper on, or make sure we have XYZ services in place in case, you know, something comes up? Do we need to be more forward with our mental health services? So, I mean, I elaborate on that comment, but I do agree, like, you
Almost-
know,
I'd almost
things we've
dive more
heard.
into mental
Mhm.
health. I mean,
Yeah,
mental emotional health with our kids, you know, having that be one of our core legislative priorities, right, is how do, you know, since we are that conduit for almost all the services families, you know, especially young children are receiving, you know, how are we doing that? And I think we're, at the very least, the district has put a lot of things into policy already around essentially the freedoms that people have, you know, and not restricting those freedoms. Yeah, I don't know, that's a good question, because I think, who knows what'll come out of the state of Iowa, you know? You know, and you know, leading the nation might be a trick for this group.
I know we can definitely talk about this for a long time, but another thing, just kind of going off your comment, Dave, you know, I think our students knowing they have a support adult in our school district is definitely a huge thing, that, you know, students need to identify that person and know who they can go to. And then, like Troy mentioned, what are those paths that they may need to take? Is it mental health? Is it finding resources for their family? Is it something we need to do as a board? So I think that's something we can continue.
Well, and mental health services and school safety is one of our legislative priorities. And even recently, we've received reports on the tiered supports that are available to our students. So, you know, I think at least one of the things that we do is continue to ensure that as a board, we're supportive of all of those efforts the district is taking. And, you know, we measure every year the percent of students who say there's a caring adult in my school that I know that I can go to. And, you know, we've talked about the different strategies that our school buildings are using to improve those numbers and ensure that those students all have someone. So at least, you know, those are things that we can do as a board, is just continue to support the things that we're currently doing. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Great discussion. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Matthews to the podium for our Student Achievement Report. I'm really excited about Dr. Matthews sharing more around the work we're doing in our secondary schools with ELA and math. And you know, we kind of started this in our elementary, really looking at what does our implementation look like with our resources, and what kind of support are we providing our teachers, and then what's the ROI on the return. And really taking a deeper dive look at our instructional coaches and the support they provide. So I thought it would be really a good presentation for Dr. Matthews to come this evening and share the work that we've been doing. So, Dr. Matthews, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your time. I enjoyed your robust conversation as well. Tonight, I have the opportunity to provide an update on the status of our math and literacy curriculum implementation. We're very excited about the work that we're doing and the start we have to this school year. This update is, of course, directly aligned to District Goal 1, which is all around improving academic achievement. I did put our 3 key metrics there related to the school just as a reminder and a reference. I won't go into detail, but we do use the MAP assessment and 3 different measures to make sure that we are making progress towards those academic goals in math and reading. So I really wanted to key in, as Dr. Murillo referenced, on two key levers that we have identified as support for our math and literacy curriculum implementation this year. And that is really around that ongoing professional development through consulting services and then also through instructional coaching. We know we have amazing teachers and amazing teacher leaders and specialists and amazing administrators. We also know how incredibly difficult this work is, and you've alluded to some of those challenges this evening yourselves. So we know that it's our responsibility to make sure that we are providing every layer of stakeholder that support that they need to ensure that we can implement our math and literacy curriculum appropriately. So I'll start by digging into our consulting services a little bit. We have just been very fortunate to work with some expert consultants and some implementation specialists, and it's been very refreshing to get an outside perspective to come in and really highlight and help us celebrate and reinforce some of the great work that we have in place, but then also to help us key in on some next steps to make sure that we are really aligned in our focus and in ensuring student learning is occurring at the levels that we need it to. When we sat down to really schedule out our year and the support that consultants could provide us, we wanted to hone in on two different ways that these consultants provide those services throughout the year. The first is through collaborative coaching visits. And really the purpose of those collaborative coaching visits is to help build our capacity, the capacity of our team. So in those visits, the consultants primarily work with our instructional coaches or our curriculum specialists, and sometimes that school administrator as well, and help to leverage their leadership within their schools around curriculum implementation. And they're doing this by providing some in-the-moment coaching, but also just engaging in the daily work of schools around math and literacy implementation. So they will be participants in professional learning communities. They will help lead and facilitate data analysis of student learning to ensure that we are getting into the resource. We're planning using the resource at the level that it's intended. So they'll ask some reflective questions, some guiding questions within those sessions. If an instructional coach is working with a teacher on a coaching cycle, that consultant kind of serves as the instructional coach's coach, because we all deserve coaching and that professional support. So those are just some of the examples of the ways that they're providing some of that support. This is all job embedded. It's happening within those plan times for teachers or within the classroom while they're instructing students. They're observing the teacher. They're providing that feedback to the coach or to the teacher directly. They're also observing student learning. They're asking students questions about their learning to make sure that we're getting down to that student level. So it's been really powerful and just a great support for our instructional coaches, specialists, classroom teachers, and administrators, kind of hitting all levels there. The other way that we're really using the consultants then is through learning walks. And really the key purpose for those learning walks is to help identify some trends across the school and across the district. So these are larger teams that go in and they conduct the learning walk in one specific content area within a school. For example, just today, we have our math consultants here right now, and we had our chief of schools, Melissa Comine for secondary, myself, school principals from both high schools, the curriculum specialist and the consultant, all engaged in these learning walks, and we went into every math classroom in both of our high schools so that we could identify trends in instruction. How is the resource being utilized? What additional supports might the teachers need? Are we seeing evidence of the different professional development that they've already received so that we can move on to next steps? So really looking for those themes, those patterns across the district. The similar things are happening at the elementary level and in ELA as well, but that was just one example. So we might go to just an elementary school and visit every classroom and focus just on their ELA for that day to get that snapshot of the trends throughout the district and throughout the building. It's really helping to provide, again, that outside perspective and also to determine next steps for professional development and coaching. And that leads us into instructional coaching. And this year we really took some time to revisit our beliefs around instructional coaching. So I wanted to share this quote with you from famous author and tennis coach, actually, Timothy Galway. It says, "Coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It is helping them to learn rather than teaching them." And that aligns directly with our philosophy and our beliefs around coaching, because again, we know how hardworking and wonderful our teachers are. It's not about making teachers better. They're great. It's about helping them learn. We're always striving for continuous improvement. It's unlocking that potential. So again, at every level, we all deserve coaching. That's why we have consultants. The consultants are coaching us. So this philosophy is for everybody, not just for our teachers. And that really just struck a chord with me. Different teams have also engaged in some book studies with our renewed focus around instructional coaching, and really tuning in on the idea of asking really high quality reflective questions, because again, the idea with coaching is just to help unlock that person's potential, and it's in there. So it's guiding them, facilitating them, supporting them in that way. So we've had some great conversations around that. And we leverage that coaching in a variety of different ways. Some different examples of some coaching support that might be provided. And this is by a variety of people, not just people who hold the title instructional coach. Administrators can serve in a coaching role. Mentors can serve in a coaching role. Teachers are sometimes coaching one another through peer collaboration and observation. So we're looking at the verb coaching rather than the noun one person being a coach. And that happens, so an example would be through some modeling. If we have new teachers and they're not very comfortable with a resource, a coach would go in and model for them how to maybe use a resource or how to use a new strategy. When we have new resources, that's important no matter if you're a veteran teacher or a new teacher, is just to have somebody there to provide that support for you. Some teachers are more comfortable, but they would like to say, try a new strategy or a new questioning technique, and they would like to co-plan. What might this look like? Let's dig into the resource. Let's plan out, where would I check for understanding? How am I going to monitor student learning? So they're doing some of that co-planning and co-teaching, having that thought partner and somebody else just to prompt and cue. Another key piece is facilitating analysis of student work and that assessment data. So in our coaching role, they are really critical around pulling that data, asking those questions around the data, even getting teachers to look at each other and say, gosh, your students did better on that performance task than mine. What did you do? Just working with the teams in that way. They're also providing feedback. They are content experts, and so they can provide feedback on the content, the curriculum resource. They've had some different training and different opportunities, so that's a way that they are supporting, and making sure, again, with our work with the consultants, that we're aligned in that feedback they're getting so that teachers feel like, okay, whether it's an instructional coach or an administrator, they're looking for the same things, and we're aligned in what they're looking for and what they're giving us professional development on, and that's been really important. And then I mentioned a little bit about leading peer observations and reflections. We know our teachers have so much to offer one another as well. And so the coaches can facilitate an opportunity for one teacher to go in and observe another and then reflect on, what did you notice about those instructional moves? What might you try in your classroom? How can I help you plan for that to happen and take that next step? So we just know that that has been very powerful in our implementation this year and that renewed focus on coaching. All of that work has been very aligned to 3 key priorities and focus areas. We wanted to ensure that we were continuing our work and our focus on vertical alignment. We had a wonderful opportunity last May as we were closing schools to start this work, to really think forward about vertical alignment and making sure that our team understood how our curriculum progresses, where students are coming from and where they need to go next, within a grade level and from grade level to grade level. It's just super important that they're seeing this is the essential learning students need to master right now so they can be successful in the future. And this is what they already know, so I don't need to spend time reteaching it. So just having that coherence has been a big focus for us this year. We're also doing a lot of intentional planning. So again, like I mentioned, sitting down, pulling your resource, making sure you're hitting the standard at the level that it needs to be, making sure that you're having a plan for how you're monitoring student learning, how you're questioning, how you're engaging students, and getting that discourse to happen within the classroom so that the learning can be fun and can come to life. It's more than just what's printed on a page in a teacher's guide. So there's a lot of work that goes into intentionally planning to make that lesson fun and engaging for students so that that learning really is solidified. And then finally, I can't emphasize enough the importance of that data-driven decision-making, and we're focused on that at the district level. We look at state assessments, district assessments, and they're also very focused on that at the building levels when they look at their own classroom data or some unit assessments they're giving. And that helps us make decisions. I mean, even this year, we made some adjustments to some curriculum maps. We noted that we were not as strong in the area of grammar in secondary, and it's a little more sophisticated, and we needed to adjust our curriculum maps to reflect that. So we're making those decisions based on the data and not just what we think is the right thing. So that's been a big driver of our work again this year. So looking ahead, we would really just like to make sure that we can stay the course. This is a heavy lift to ensure that we are educating students and implementing our math and literacy curriculum at the levels that it needs to be. And our teachers are really just embracing the work. They're digging in, and I'm so proud when we get to visit those classrooms to see that evidence of that hard work in their rooms. We'll be completing our secondary math learning walks tomorrow at the middle school levels, so that's very exciting. Immediately following that, the consultants have a day with each of our secondary specialists to really take what we learned, we consolidate all of that, and we have action steps, so they will complete their planning and hit the ground running when they return in January after break. So we're very excited about that work. We will also have our winter math assessment right when we return from break, so that will give us another opportunity to look at that data, make those data-driven decisions to see our efforts paying off, where might we need to adjust. And then we have a wonderful gift of a half-day professional development for teachers on January 16th. So that will give building principals a wonderful opportunity to really hone in on their school improvement plans and have a nice half-day chunk of time to work with their teachers and facilitate a wonderful learning opportunity for them related to all of this work and their own school improvement plans. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we ever see any negative impact on the MAP assessment being held after the break? I mean, do the kids have like a 2-week off period? Or we, just for curiosity, is the MAP to make sure what was retained? Is that a retention thing? Because it feels like to me having a 2-week off is really going to drastically skew our results.
We do sometimes see a slight dip. I don't know if we can attribute it specifically to winter break, but we do have certain windows for screening assessments that those assessments fall within.
So they can't be moved up? No? Gotcha.
Any other questions?
They dictate those windows to us. And so they give us those windows of time, like the fall, the winter, and the spring. And we have to stay within that because we want to be compared nationally across with like peers.
Everybody's getting hit with the same thing. It's all online.
What would you typically see in improvement in education in delivery when students are in a classroom that has a teacher that is kind of cutting edge in the professional development and being able to meet all students' needs to get that core curriculum together? What difference do we see when, I guess, better placed when we have a teacher that is coached very well to a teacher that isn't coached very well?
So a great example of that is with our math curriculum at the secondary level. It is a problems-based curriculum, and it really focuses on that conceptual understanding and students really engaging in mathematical work. So you would expect to see a lot of student collaboration and making meaning of the math through their discourse and conversations. And so having a teacher who's skillful in facilitating that learning opportunity versus maybe some traditional practices that we would be used to, where a teacher might do some problems on the board and then just pass out worksheets. That's math of the past. Now we're looking for those rich, engaging learning opportunities where students are making meaning of the math with a teacher who plans scaffolds for those who need extra support, but then also knows when not to jump in so that students can have that productive struggle and make that meaning.
How much longer do we have the consultants working
So we've
here?
contracted year to year. This is our
Okay.
first year working with them in our secondary levels, and research really shows that you need at least 3 years to really see that long-term payoff, because it's difficult work.
So we're planning for at least 3 years.
We would like to bring a proposal to continue that work.
Okay.
We were able to use our ESSER dollars.
Yeah.
To help take care of this. So at least another year. But we want the work to be sustainable. And a teacher just seeing someone 1 year and then they never come back, they need to know that we're going to continue to support them.
Right.
So the research does say, and we talked about that, 3 years really, so that our teachers feel very comfortable with planning. And as Tracy gave that example, how different is that from when we were in school? And that shift that
Yeah.
is occurring. We have some teachers that are coming out in different time periods, and so they've been taught, their pedagogy looks a lot different than our students
Right.
just graduating now. So we do need to wrap around and provide that support.
Yeah.
Wrapped up with a different.
On this, yes.
So we have the same elementary math consultant, and then through that same company, we've found a wonderful secondary consultant for math. And then for ELA, we have had the same consultant for elementary, and we have a new implementation specialist for Study Sync for 6-12
And for
ELA.
elementary, we're on year 2 currently?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And our consultants got to work with our middle school teachers this summer, which was really great through the math camp.
Yes, and it was a wonderful opportunity for them to build relationships with those teachers and with the students too, going into the school year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matthews. At this time for our, let me grab some glasses here, our informational presentation, I'd like to invite Mr. Hamilton to the podium. He'll be presenting tonight on the proactive and positive behavior supports we have for our schools. And exciting to see the work continue to grow, knowing that we're in the beginning stages for many of our schools, but we are seeing some really good positive feedback on the work. So Mr. Hamilton, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And this isn't just the work of Student Family Services alone. This is really coming out of the multi-tiered systems of support process, which you're going to learn more about next month. We're going to present more information on that. But it's really coming out of that team, which is a collaboration between school leadership, teaching and learning, student and family services together. I just am the lucky one who gets to present to you today. So really when we talk about this, and I kudos to the board for just the conversation that we had before we all started. Goal 4 for the district is to ensure that each student is supported and connected. That means each student is supported and connected, given what they need to be successful in school. So when we talk about the behavior supports, we know that there's students who need extra help, just like there's students who need extra help with math or reading. So really what we're focusing on today, though, is our universal tier, because all the supports that we put in place looking at SEL, looking at all the things that we've done, we still knew, and there were teachers asking for, what is our universal tier? What are we going to do as a district to support each student? So I've been up here every month, the last few months, talking about a few different things. Dr. Morella loves my stool here, but it really does fit together. You ask, like, well, how is this different than what we're already doing? Well, a couple years ago, we really focused on trauma-informed schools, and we continue that work with all new staff. So that's teaching the staff how to work best with kids. That's the best practices for them. Last year, I stood up here and I talked about social-emotional learning and giving students the skills that they need to be regulated and ready to learn and really just work with people out in society, right? So this last piece of our three-legged stool is foundations, champs, and what we call discipline in secondary classroom. We're putting all of these things together so we can have a positive school environment so kids can be successful and reach their highest potential. So when we talked about this, in the past we had worked with safe and civil schools a little bit, but we had just done it in pockets, like we had done a lot of things with behavior and trauma. We had always just done it in pockets. So when we looked at it from a district perspective, we decided to go with safe and civil schools because 1, it was research-based, and 2, their beliefs truly aligned with what our beliefs are. So their beliefs are that all students must be treated with dignity and respect. Students should be taught the skills and behavior necessary for success. Just like math and reading, we have to teach them what we want to see, right? Motivation and responsibility should be encouraged through positive interactions and building relationships with students. I've only been talking about that for a couple of years, right? We know that if we build relationships with students, they're far more likely to do the things that we ask them to do, and they have that safe and caring adult at school. And the last piece is student misbehavior represents a teaching opportunity. So we know students are going to misbehave. When they come to school, they're learning. They're in an environment that many of them in kindergartners, which we see the largest issue is kindergartners that first month of school because they haven't been in that environment. So they're going to make mistakes. We need to teach them from their mistakes so they don't continue to make them. So looking at this multi-tiered systems of support, the two programs that I'm going to be talking about tonight are CHAMPS, or Discipline in Secondary Classrooms. Those are really synonymous with each other. CHAMPS is just our elementary model. Discipline in Secondary Classrooms is our high school model. That's really looking at the classroom environment. How do teachers set themselves up for success within their classroom? And then the next piece is the foundations, which is our school-wide. What are we doing school-wide to ensure students are safe and to ensure that they know what to do and to really just limit those negative behavior interactions? So first I'll talk about foundations. Again, this is our school-wide approach. We've been working almost a year with our foundations team. We have a consultant, just like we do with reading and math, who came out. They did it virtually. We planned on doing it 3 times last year, but with COVID, we were only able to have them come out 2 times. And then they're going to come out 3 times this year. So each time they come out, they work with our foundations team. So the team at the school, which is generally the administrator, a couple teachers, para, we are trying to make sure everybody in the school is represented on this team. So they come out and they spend the day with us here. We pull them out of the schools, which I know some people hate, but it truly is giving an opportunity for those teams to work together, to gather that data, to say what is most important for us at our school, to change, to make sure kids are safe and that we're having good behavior within our schools. We had it one time already this year. We're having it again the end of January and then in March. And they're continuing, and then our consultant also, just like with math and reading, is doing site visits with that. So she comes out and does 2 days of training. And then the 3rd day she does 4 school visits. So she did 4 visits when she was here before, and she'll do 4 more the next time to really look at how it's being implemented within our schools. The foundations process, the improvement cycle, starts with reviewing the data. The data can be anything from referrals to just teacher input on where do you think is the most need. Then they prioritize. Again, looking at those areas, they set their goals for improvement. Then they revise the current plan, because every school has plans for kids walking in the hallway, using the bathroom, in the cafeteria. So they really look at how do we revise this to make it better. A lot of our district staff have gone out and been consultants with them and just observed, because it's far easier for someone who isn't there every day seeing it to recognize, like, hey, here's some things that I see that you might want to do different. So they revise their plan, and then they adopt the new plan. This is the foundations team. They take that plan then to their whole staff. Sometimes the staff doesn't agree with what comes out of it, and that's great. We want it to be something that everybody can have buy-in to. I know in recent Friday Notes we gave you some information about the current cell phone policy, right? A good example of that is the team said we want to do something about cell phones. They developed a plan. They took it to all of their staff to say, here's our plan. One of the staff members at that time said, you know what, I think we could do this better. I think we should do this. Joined the team, and the team went back and completely revised what they were going to do, come up with a plan that has been truly successful at Kern. So it's always not just taking, this is what we're going to do. If it doesn't work, or if there's better ideas, we should change, right? And then they implemented it. So each school in the last year has looked at least one common area that they've gone to. Many schools have done hallways, or cafeterias have been their first choice of common areas to look at. So CHAMPS. CHAMPS is stands for conversation. And you'll see this, and I'll show you an example of this here on the next slide. So CHAMPS stands for conversation. We need to teach students during whatever you're doing at that time in class. So if you're providing instruction or if you're doing group work, Conversation. How do they talk to each other? What does that look like? What are the voice levels? Help. How do students get their questions answered? So whatever activity they're doing, how do they get help? Activity. So what is it that I should be doing during this part in class? Movement. Can students move around? And if so, how do they do that? Again, this is teachers teaching this to their class ahead of time so they know the expectations. Participation. What does the behavior look like? Are we doing group work? Is this individual work? Is this computer work? What does that look like? And then success. If we follow all of these CHAMP guidelines, will we have success? And as a teacher, I know if I set this up for students, if I'm not going to have success, I need to go back and change my guidelines. So I want to show you a couple. The one on the left is one from elementary. And so this is for their workplaces. So the conversation piece says low voice level 1 or 2. Again, teachers have already taught this, so they know what level 1 is or they know what level 2 is. Help. How do I get help? You can either ask your partner for help. If they don't know, you raise your hand. Or activity. So what are they doing during the math workplace? They're playing workplace games. Movement. When can I move around? So it says pick a game, stay, play 2 rounds, and switch, so they can move to switch. P, the participation. So what should they be doing? They should be having math talk, rolling dice, and using tools. And then the S for success. What does it look like if we're successful? You're going to be able to finish the math game and you can explain it to others. Now look at the one on the right. So imagine you see the word CHAMP spelled out here, because I didn't have room on all these. This is more of a secondary. This is actually from AL. I walked into a classroom today and I took a picture of it, and I didn't really like the way the picture looked on the presentation, so I asked him to just send it to me. So you can see there's 3 different boxes there. So they'll have the word CHAMPS on the board or somewhere in the room. This one actually had magnets. So depending upon what activity they were using, they either had stay seated, move with permission, or responsible movement. For each one of those areas, they have 3 different criteria. Conversation was 0 voice, level 1, or level 2. And they just move a magnet. So whatever they're doing, kids know what the expectation is. They know how to get help. They know everything they should know to be successful in class. So with CHAMPS, we provided professional development at Summer Academy, and it was the early bird session. So every staff member received training on CHAMPS or discipline in secondary classrooms. We also had select administrator and staff that were trained to be coaches, all of our behavior consultants, our mentors, so we can continue to do this for years to come without having to have the consultants come back. Because the idea is we want to be able to do this on our own without them. So we've trained many of our administrators and staff. And then we started right away after the summer and said, schools, they have some autonomy here, but we said you need to implement at least 1 by the end of the first quarter. Many schools have done far more than that, because you see them just like that math workplace. That was one of, like, they're like, Tim, how many do you want? I've got 10 different ones for all the things that they do. So we asked them to do at least 1. And then they can just continue. Once they get 1, they continue with the next one and the next one. So all of the areas of their classroom are covered. Many of the high schools started with, or both our secondary schools, because there's a lot more movement, started with direct instruction, and then they went to how you enter the classroom and how you exit the classroom, just because those were the times of most need. So just like in foundations or CHAMPS, it's really looking at what is most needed for kids to be successful. So looking ahead, we met with all of our administrators last week. Kate Bays has really led this. She's a rock star. She couldn't be here tonight because she had another family commitment, but she's worked with our administrators each month. We're given time during the last 2 months during professional development to really think about, somebody mentioned the MAP test after break. We know kids sometimes forget a little bit of stuff during break. So we really worked with our administration to make sure they're out in classrooms and make sure that their teachers are supported. So when we come back from break, that they're reteaching the things that we've gone over. So they're reteaching how to walk in the hallways. They're reteaching how to enter classrooms. They're reteaching that behavior. We'll continue that professional development. Like I said, those team meetings, we have them up here, and then schools are doing them throughout the months, because each time we have the professional development here, they have an assignment to complete. And then the building walkthroughs. We've already are looking ahead at new staff, because it doesn't do us any good to just do 1 year of training and then next year new staff don't know anything about it. So we have some time set aside for our new staff to be trained, and really our behavior consultants within each building are really going to be the experts on that. And then we'll continue that implementation cycle. Once we have one thing done, what's the next thing that needs to be done to make sure kids are safe? So the last thing that I will provide is, we ask in our Panorama staff survey each year, how effective are the school leaders at developing rules for students that facilitate their learning? So from fall of 21 to fall of 22, so just the limited amount of time that we've been doing this, there's been a 17% increase on what staff believe the effectiveness of how our leaders are implementing the rules for kids, which I think is great. So with that, I will answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
Not so much a question, but I think this is great work.
It is great.
And this really dives into the heart of our kids and making sure that they're coming out of our schools to be productive members of our society and can function well. And we're all in a new world after the pandemic too. So this is fantastic work. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. And kudos to you guys, because you made my heart sing.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. LaFerla. That completes our report for this month.
Great, thank you very much. Brings us to our resolutions. First, we have a second reading of policies. Is there a motion?
I can move to approve the second reading of the policies and the first and only reading of the corresponding administrative regulations as presented. 407, professional development. 433, employee expression. 603, curriculum development, implementation, and assessment. 603.1, curriculum implementation. 603.2, curriculum evaluation. 615, instructional material selection and replacement. 616, review and/or objection to instructional materials. 616.1, reconsideration of instructional materials. 16.2, request for consideration of instructional materials and media center materials. And 639, new policy, technology, and instructional materials as presented.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, actually, I was reviewing this earlier this week, and I was kind of kicking myself that I didn't catch this on the first read through. But one of the policies, I believe it's a 616, the verbiage that we're adding, all instructional materials, including teachers' manuals, films, tapes, or other supplementary materials, which will be used in connection with any surveys, analysis, or evaluation as part of any federally funded programs, must be available for inspection by parents. I think we need to add parents or guardians to that, just because that matches the state legislation that kind of drove this change. So that was one change I think needs to be made.
We'll add.
Good catch. How do parents review all those things? Just curious. I saw how they object to it. Just curious how they review all of it.
Dr. Matthews, you want to talk about how we put our instructional materials out so that parents can have access to those to review?
Just through.
Our curriculum maps are available for public view, and then upon request, we would make any additional that are not free access, because some of that is purchased and copyrighted, we would make available upon request.
If I'm a teacher and I'm jumping online and I'm showing something, are they taking copies of that, then they're pasting that, sending that to someone to catalog if they've used that resource during the day? I'm just curious. In a real world.
District-approved curriculum resources.
Okay. It says supplementary materials. That's why I thought that would be a lot of materials. Okay.
And I know that was something then when Dr. Borthman was here and that came forward, that we had a lot of conversation around that. because, teachers will look for ways to engage students and sometimes think, besides what we have in our resources, maybe something else. But really, the state has kind of put the parameters around. It is our adopted resources and our adopted supplemental resources. And as I know that Dr. Voigtman talked to many parents, especially around social studies, when there was some, kind of some ideas out there floating. And we welcome any questions from our parents, our community, guardians. As we post the curriculum maps, if there's something else they're looking for, we would invite them to contact us.
So the parents then, if they have a concern about, say, non-approved instructional materials covered by a different policy?
If there are teachers using non-approved, and it is something that parents have identified, they should let their principal know, so that their principal then can work with Dr. Matthews and Ms. Colmine to address that.
And Dr. Morello, isn't it outlined in 616.1?
Yes.
As well?
So does that addendum need to say all approved instructional materials then?
Dr. Matthews?
It just says all instructional materials, including yada yada. So if it's only the approved ones, then should that be amended as well as Mr. Peters' suggestion of guardians?
That's 616.
Right, that's in 616.
We did take this language from model policy from IASB, and as Dr. Morello said, if there were any instructional material used that a parent has a question about, we would work with the parent and the building administration and the teacher to review that resource, whatever it is. So I would be comfortable leaving it as recommended by IASB if the board supports that.
And the state is requiring that we have this approved by December 13th.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct? Am I on the 15th?
Yes.
And but what took us so long to get through this is IASB was really working around this language, and we felt like instead of creating our own, we should stay with what the state
Somebody else.
and other districts were using.
We had a long conversation about several of these, and we opted to keep the language as written because, it talks about like films and tapes and materials we don't use anymore, but we chose to keep the same language just so it would stay in line with what they recommended.
So do we need a motion for the amendment, or can that go through because there's a third reading?
There is no third reading.
There's no third reading?
We
of this
want
one?
on this
I thought we had a third.
But does it require a minute if we're just adding "and guardians"?
No.
No.
Because we have guardians in the first sentence, so it was just a miss
Yeah,
in
it just
in that last
it seemed like a
sentence.
typo. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why I brought it up. Yeah.
What's the, some of the language changes around including articles to promote and or teach about compliance with applicable Iowa laws? There's some interesting professional development language in that portion. I assume there's just a change to Iowa law. I didn't know what professional development we do with our staff around teaching compliance with applicable state laws. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
This is in direct response to House File 802, which is about being in compliance with laws around teaching or with sexism and racism specifically, and so making sure that we wouldn't be promoting any kind of sexist or racist content within our curriculum. So that would be the applicable law that we would need to follow there.
Anything else? Oh. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
And I've opened up online voting as well. Ms. Shudek?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. And the second reading of policies has been approved. Next, we have a resolution requesting funds for limited English proficient instruction beyond 5 years, modified supplemental amount. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can move the district administration be authorized to submit a request to the School Budget Review Committee for a modified supplemental amount of $242,176 related to the English language learning program for students who have exceeded 5 years of waiting that are included on the fall 2021 certified enrollment headcount.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Is this just kind of a follow? Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping
Interesting.
someone would
Um,
ask that, because Mr. Wilson and I have had conversation around this, and I asked him to prepare, because the next two board items fall in the same. So I felt like with new board members, that it would be really helpful for Mr. Wilson to walk through what really does that mean, a supplemental amount request, and why would we have that in these three areas? So, Mr. Wilson?
So modified supplemental amount, or spending authority, as we call it, is an increase that we get the spending authority, but not the cash to back it. The cash that cash comes from property taxes, which we levy every year. Now, our MSA request will not increase the property tax levy because the district has sufficient cash on hand for this. So it's not going to cost the taxpayers any more money to get this modified allowable growth. Also, we are required to provide these services whether or not the board approves the MSA request. So if we're going to do it, we should probably get the spending authority for it. This is for 140 intermediate students and 12 intensive students, and there's different weightings. There's a .21 weighting for the intermediate and a .26 for the intensive. And that's where we come up with the 242,176.
So these students have aged kind of out of our 5-year
Right.
learning program.
Right.
Still doing this. Was the reason the aging out was some of that was that some after effects of COVID? Is it just
No,
still need the
it happens
services?
every year.
I mean, it's just additional services.
It just
Okay.
happens every year.
Okay.
Okay?
Would you like him to explain the other two, since he's there?
Might as well.
Nice one.
Okay, Dean, would you go ahead?
So the other one for increased enrollment, we had 19.6 more certified count enrollment students, weighted enrollment students, as of October 1st, 2022, which we will use for the 23-24 budget. What this is asking for is that we are allowed to get extra spending authority this year because those students are here, rather than having to wait a whole new year. So they'll give us another 145,961 for those 19.6 additional weighted students. The last item is districts may request open enrolled out in the current year for whom the district is required to pay tuition in the current year, but were not included in the certified enrollment count for the prior year. Okay? And that's 108.6 students. So students are coming in and out, in and out. And this one is that they weren't on the count last year, but they enrolled out for this year. So we'll get spending authority to pay that money out to the other school districts when they claim them. And that's, as I said, 108.6 students for $784,852.
Dean, are we going to see a lot more of that in and out with this?
We do every year.
Okay.
In fact, when you look at this every year, we have, if you add these numbers up, it's about 1,000,001. It's always around 1 million to 1,000,001 every year. It just shifts in here how much we get for this or that. But this one by far and away is the largest component of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sure.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Mr. Peters,
Yes.
Ms. Myers,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, motion carries. Next, we have open enrollment out, not on prior year's head count, modified supplemental amount request, the SBRC. Is there a motion?
I'll motion the district's administration is authorized to submit a request to the School Budget Review Committee for a modified supplemental amount of $784,852 for open enrolled out students who were not included in the district's previous year certified enrollment count.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tripp, Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. Next, we have increased enrollment, modified supplemental amount request, the SBRC. Is there a motion?
I move that the district's administration is authorized to submit a request to the School Budget Review Committee for a modified supplemental amount of $145,961 due to an increase of certified enrollment from the prior year as presented.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and any further discussion on this one? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. The motion carries. Next, we have approval of the Cardonex Master Scheduler, which we learned about at a work session previously. Is there a motion?
I'll motion the board approves the purchase of the Cardonix software. What is the price on that? It didn't, $38,889.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, can you explain what this does exactly for the public?
Yeah, I've had Mr. Milborn and Ms. Comine really working closely with this, and I don't know which one would like to speak, Mr. Milborn. But the bullet items that you see there are really what attracted us, especially that the software will go back and forth with PowerSchool, which is our information system. But the one thing that I found is in the district, we did not have a software. Every secondary school was master scheduling differently. And our middle schools were really creating a master schedule on a big piece of paper and then hand inputting that master schedule. And it's just a labor of, and Mr. Milborn, go ahead and join me, Gary. He really heard this presentation. I can't remember where you heard the presentation. And we continue to, I bet we have met, I know Ms. Comine at least 2 or 3 times, and our principals have all been in meetings, so.
Ms. Colmine has been working with the principals and the counselors on possibly implementing this moving forward. Really what it does is it takes artificial intelligence, AI, a program, and things we do a lot on spreadsheets and this over here, and uses that data and creates a schedule in a much more streamlined, standardized, and efficient way at the building level. At the district level, what it does, as buildings are creating that, central office can also see course request in the staffing and allows us to have a two-way, like really transparent communication between the building and central office about staffing and the needs of students and possible programming options. So really, the two major things are streamlining at the building level and then creating the transparency all the way through the system.
So I have a question. So the billing says it's for the 2022 to 2023 school year. So does that cover January to December, or are we already using it for 6 months, or is it prorated?
We would do it now to build next year's schedule.
Okay,
But we haven't started yet.
We haven't started.
Yeah.
correct. But I didn't know how much
First
that
meeting is when?
bill covered, yeah.
If it gets passed
If it
tonight.
gets passed, we'll be meeting
It'd be
this
like-
week.
Okay. Mhm. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. And finally, we have approval of a vehicle purchase. Is there a motion?
I move for the approval of the purchase of a 2019 Nissan passenger van from Dillon Auto in the amount of $55,000.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? This van is replacing a van that was stolen, correct? And is used to transport students to different events around the community.
They found the stolen van.
They did find it.
It was not in one
That
piece.
shape.
Not in one piece. Not in one piece.
Any other discussion or questions for Dr. Murillo? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Last item of business is approval of our consent agenda, which includes acknowledgement of donations from Knights of Columbus in the amount of $674.51, and another donation in the amount of $668.57 to support our special education programs. MOU with the Council of Schools Foundation, the 2023-2024 High School Program of Studies, approval of special education contracts for students placed outside of our district, personnel action, and claims and accounts. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I will move approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No, and I just question, any changes to the MOU between us and Community Foundation? Yeah, can you talk about those?
Let me pull it up. We really went to work, there's been a shift in the focus and kind of the planning of the foundation, and we really wanted to update that document. So Chris, while I pull it up, if you have something.
Yeah, the primary changes just revolved around the Schools Foundation's annual fundraising activities and annual grant-making programs. We expanded our grant-making programs. We've been fortunate to be raising, we've raised more money the last few years, which has allowed us to expand grant programs. So the changes that I can remember that we made off the top of my head were primarily revolved around how the foundation will support the school district through the grant programs.
I don't remember the last time I saw this. It's been a long time, so.
Well, Mr. LaFerla and I were meeting on the foundation, and we talked about the MOU, and it's been a while, because we kind of did it on a rotating year, and we thought, and so I had Emily pull that, look at the work that the foundation was doing to see if we could upgrade, and really, it really aligns with the work that we're doing, and the language is the same. So I'm really excited about the new work. And as you can see in the back, it talks about the priority grants, which is new, and we've labeled those as new. And then this also helps our staff out in the buildings, knowing what they can apply for grants, and what the foundation will support and help in the work. And so really excited about that. And then, of course, it continues to support the STARS program, which we know is a really good program.
I just want to make a comment with the high school program of studies for the up and coming year, that it was exciting to see some of the new courses, because I would have loved some of them as a high school student. And our students have some really great learning opportunities that kind of pique their interest. So it was really neat to see some of those changes and some additions.
And I also believe we had 15 freshmen, am I right, that had a 4.0 at Iowa Western this semester? Am I close? Where am I at? 12? It's out on Twitter. 13? I'm dancing around it.
Is it on your Twitter?
It's on my Twitter.
Okay, let me-
because I had to
Early
congratulate them.
College Academy one too.
The Early College
Yes.
Academy and our students, and just so excited to see our students really flourish and really take off on the Iowa Western campus. And these are students from all walks of life. And they are just soaking it up. The opportunities are being provided.
15.
15. I thought it was 15, but you
13.
guys
15
made me doubt
seniors.
myself, right?
Yeah, 15 seniors.
Saw a few different numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, out there.
Yeah, so excited.
So with this nice little test pool of students that are working with us, have we started to define those things that really are leading to their success?
Well, we are doing the On Track to Diploma Plus One, so we know it's attendance, we know it's grades. We also know that we are monitoring how they're doing on proficiency levels and are they making growth each year. And I think that all from K through 8 sets students up to be successful when they walk into that 9th grade year. And then really taking that 9th grade year to dip their toe in concurrent credit in the school and begin to talk about opportunities and what are they passionate about as we continue to grow those pathways. Because not all students want to go to Iowa Western, but some students, we need to grow what's happening in the schools so that our kids have opportunity no matter what their desire is. And that's a really great piece of this. We always celebrate those on the Western campus. But we do some really great work, and you should have, I'm sure you've seen Troy being there this weekend at the robotics, that house that our students are building for Habitat, that's going up. And that is super exciting to know that our students will build that. They'll come and take it and drop it on a piece of land. And then they can go in and watch. And at my last, I had a community roundtable on Friday, and Brian Rasmussen walked up and said, I know I can't bring students to Job Shadow and be pre-apprentice in ours where we go on jobs, but if we're doing work in your school, I think we should try to make something happen for these kids. They can come and shadow us while we're working. So you're starting to see the community too say, how can I help? How can I provide that next level?
That's great.
Awesome.
And I don't know if we're going to have any of the athletes show up at any future meetings, but we had some really good stuff with the dance team I saw and our wrestling.
Wonderful. Yes,
Mhm.
both
So that was really
schools.
exciting to see.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
I will abstain. And that concludes our business this evening. We are adjourned.